Willkommen bei einer neuen Episode von Markenkraft. Für alle, die von Marken fasziniert und für ihr Wohlergehen verantwortlich sind. Herzlich willkommen and welcome to another episode of Markenkraft. My name is Olaf Hartmann and I have the great pleasure today to speak to Professor Koen Pauwels. Koen is one of the worldwide top scientists on marketing and ad effectiveness. He's professor of marketing at the Northeastern University, publishes regularly in the Harvard Business Review, the Sloan Management Review, and wrote several books on smart data analytics, the digital economy, and improving marketing decision-making. And I was really impressed when I saw them being translated in Chinese, Turkish, and many other languages. He's an academic with a sure footing in marketing practice. That's why I love to have him on the show, as he works as a consultant for over 20 years. And since 2019, he's also the principal research scientist for Amazon. He shares actionable insights with agencies and advertisers under the motto, helping people avoid bad choices and make best choices. I'm a great fan of his newsletter and was delighted that he recently gave a presentation at the GEM Markendialog in Berlin about the changes in consumer behavior in the current crisis, which led to this podcast. Welcome, Koen. Great to have you on the show.
Fantastic. Thank you much for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
Yeah. So for our Markenkraft warm-up, I always prepare a couple of quick fire round questions and you answer like you feel, long or short. Mountain gear or beach towel?
Mountain gear.
Leonidas or Neuhaus?
Definitely Leonidas.
Budweiser or Jupiler?
Jupiler, but my favorite beer is none of those two.
Okay, which one is your favorite?
I like Kriek, the Belgian cherry beer.
The Kriek. So you like Goeze as well, that 99% of our listeners probably are not familiar with. I'm a great Goeze fan. As I told you, I'm married to a Belgian, and I really love this. Maybe we can educate people. This is an education podcast. Please explain what Goeze is.
So most beer had a very kind of typical bitter taste, right? With everything else that's going on. So whenever somebody says to me, I just don't like beer, I say, well, you haven't tried Belgian beer yet. So for the current lovers of wine or cognac or whatever your poison or your pleasure is, right? Depending on how you put it. So Belgian beer like Goeze and the derivatives like Kriek, Framboos, Pêche, which is the peach variant, are spontaneously fermented. So you get the typical bitter taste from beer and it's really injected in there. Whereas those beers are just like wine. They're in these oak wooden barrels and they're exposed to the bacteria in the air. So they spontaneously ferment and they don't have this very bitter taste. They're more like sour sweet, depending on, for instance, how they're mixed and which kind of fruit is added. The traditional Goeze, which you may like and which you can get only in very select, I think, Brussels cafes, is actually very sour and not to my liking, personally. But the sweet and sour variations are just absolutely delicious. So if you traditionally don't like beer, this is definitely something you should try before giving up on the whole category altogether.
Definitely worth trying, but you need to take some money because that's a really expensive beer. If you order that in a pub, easily 9-10 euros, or like even if you buy it wholesale, it's like 4 euros. But like you said, it's like spontaneously fermented. And I used to live in Brussels near one of those old Goeze factories. Yeah. And I learned there that it can only be brewed in a circumference of 20 kilometers around Brussels. And this spontaneous fermentation is generated from a bacteria which only exists there. And guess who found out that this bacteria existed? The Americans. They came over and wanted to find out what's this mystery about this beer only being, spontaneously fermenting around here. And they found there's this extra bacteria just around there.
Okay. So this is one of the things that I love about the States, and probably one of the reasons I immigrated from Belgium to the States, right? So the American curiosity and the desire for experimentation. So the US, by the way, now is officially the third best country for beer Can you imagine it? The home of Budweiser and so forth.
All the craft beers, huh?
Yeah. All the craft beers. So when home brewing became very popular, and when it was no longer dependent on the water from a specific river, because you can now get any water, my fellow Americans here, they went crazy. And so it's letting 1,000 flowers bloom, right? A lot of these experiments are just way too hoppy or just not drinkable. But once in a while, you find something really, really good. And I like this. Going back to Brussels, by the way, this is actually a kind of an interlude into marketing. So my bachelor's party was in the center of Brussels. It started on the Grand Market. It ended up with the pub crawl of all of the ghost places, increasing levels of alcohol. But the first task that my two brothers gave me, they gave me kind of sheets of paper, and I had like 10 minutes to memorize them. And then I had to pretend to be a guide in training of Brussels. And I had to gather foreign tourists around me to pretend to give this guide a tour of Brussels. Now, what was so funny about it, the sheet of paper was all, very, strong stories from my own family. Our uncles and aunts, they told us crazy stuff. And I was put in a 15th century light. So my uncle André became the great duke. And my last name, Pauwels, means son of a peacock in Dutch, my native language.
Son of a peacock.
Son of a peacock. And as you may remember, in the Grand Market in Brussels, there is a golden peacock somewhere. So I started there. Mm-hmm. I got this bunch of 25, Japanese, Irish, English, American, Spanish foreign tourists around me. And I started there explaining my family's history, which I knew was all kind of strong stories from the 20th century, as if they were 15th century. Because my brother's like, you're in marketing, you know how to lie, you can pull this off.
You know how to lie. What a bad
exactly,
reputation.
Such a bad reputation.
So bad.
Yeah, they're both lawyers. So if anything, I would say they know how to twist the truth, but that's a lot of discussion. And so I got these people around me, right? But of course, as I was giving the tour, because my brothers were snickering at the back, one by one, the tourists figured out that this was not a true tour and left. But at the very end, there was this one lonely kind of tourist. It was a woman from Japan who had just kind of, just drunk all of the wisdom and all of the stories. And I had to tell her, well, I'm sorry, this is a bachelor party. This was fake. This is like, in respondents, you give a debrief, right? And so I now have to go on to the next part, and we have to go to a pub crawl. So sorry. But that was the story of my bachelor's.
Oh, that's fantastic. And okay, I think this podcast is going to take some other turns that I expected, but I have to, this is too good, because on the Grand Place, I also made one of the first experiences. I mean, like your brothers basically gave you already their bad reputation of marketing, whereas we understand marketing as the truth well told. Yes. Yeah. But I also made my first really important experience on marketing at the Grand Place in Brussels.
Oh.
Because I used to, when I lived there, I had an American friend, and he was a juggler, and we juggled together. And so we were training like for 6 months for this juggling show with like torches and knives and balls and whatever. And then we said, okay, no, now we are ready for our first show. So we decided we wanted to make a lot of money. So near the Grand Place, there's the Place de la Monnaie. Yeah, the place of money. I mean, like, so what a great place to start your first endeavor in juggling. So we went there and thought, like, we need a lot of people. And so Thursday afternoon, when everybody goes on lunch break, there are lots of people there going to the cafes, eat out there and so on. So we said, like, okay, that's the place. We're going to do our show. So we juggled for over an hour there, and we earned in total €2.
Oh.
€2 in 1 hour. And we were completely devastated. But we believed in our product. So we changed the context to the Grand Place, one of those small side streets of the Grand Place. Yeah. Next to a cash machine where all the tourists wait on Saturday night to draw money. And we juggled next to that cash machine to that big line of tourists getting money. And we delivered the same product, and we made €160. And that was a revelation moment that quality is always relative to perception. Yeah, it's the context that made the difference. And we were not at the Grand Place. We were not basically the motives that people had that passed us by. They wanted to get their lunch quickly, meet their colleagues, and so on. And we were like an obstacle in between, like throwing those torches and knives and whatever, and they had to get by. And suddenly, the same people maybe on Saturday, going there with their girlfriend, wanting to have a good time, wanting to be entertained, and suddenly our product sold.
This is wonderful. It touches on two things that we may talk about in this podcast. So number one, in retailing, we always used to say there's 3 key success factors in retailing. You probably know this, right? We're all old school. Location, location, location. So on the online world, that is actually still true. It's just a slightly different kind of thing. The other way that I wanted to put here is yes, kind of the mood that people in and why they're there for is just absolutely key. So I have a paper with a German and a Dutch author that I love so much. And it's basically, this was published in 2016, right? And we saw, well, every year there's a new kind of big new thing in marketing, like a new channel you have to do, either online or offline. So
and everything else dies. Everything else dies. Everything else dies.
TV is dead, display heights are dead, everything is dead, except for the one new thing, right? That is cool that year. So we were like, well, if we write this paper, and we had great empirical data because we're data people, and we were like, how can we write a conceptual framework so it's not completely obsolete next year? And so we came up with this concept of content integration and content separation. And it simply means the following, right? So if you are typically in a location, right? And let me just talk about online because that was the context of that study. And we had about 15 online different ad forms. If you're online, and so let's say you're looking for a game or shoes or entertainment. And basically that is your purpose for, let's say, visiting a website. If I now place an ad there about entertainment or shoes or games, you're going to be so much more receptive to it. Whereas if afterwards, let's say you didn't buy the shoe, and now you're checking sports, and suddenly I retarget you with an ad about shoes, you're like, no, this is content separated. This is not the reason why I'm in the website for. And so what we found, and this was for an online retailer in the Netherlands, they thought that some actions were extremely powerful, including retargeting, and empirically they were less powerful. They got as many traffic to the retailer, so we saw the traffic increase by about the same amount, but these folks were a lot less likely to convert to actually purchasing, about only a third as likely. So we said, look, if you want quality consumers, you should do the content integration. You should be there when people are in a mood, as you said, with your juggling, to have a good time. And where the purpose of the website is indeed, maybe to explore or buy new products or, to connect with something cool. And so different websites cater to different kind of moods. And you should respect that as a marketer.
And that goes against what has been preached for many years now, is like, it's all about reaching the right people. And it doesn't matter the context. And that is that, like I sell you Koen, like you are the target, cheaper than my competitor. Yeah, wherever Koen, we just have to reach him. So it doesn't make a difference if I reach you at the highway gas station in front of the toilet or in the champagne bar in the Adlon in Berlin. It doesn't make a difference. Yeah, and that I always, it always troubled me that was basically the story of just selling impressions and the right people. Yeah, and so this goes together. It's like the effectiveness of marketing depends very much on understanding the motives that people have in certain contexts. Yeah. So also to target stable personas is also not helpful there, because Koen in front of the bathroom or Koen in the champagne bar, you will be receptive to completely different things, yeah. And so both times the description of Koen would be the same, yeah. So I think that clustering context is very powerful. I'm happy that we already reached the 4th question of my intro. Okay. So let's continue there, but we'll return to that. That's a very interesting.
Just a quick kind of anecdote for your German audience, right? So I was always amazed. So I was at the the Association for Consumer Research conference in Berlin. I think it was 2000.
Oh, I was there as well. Oh,
yeah, it was so fantastic. I love the city. We had a running tour of it, but my dear colleague Alex Bleyer, which actually was in Boston, and I returned to Germany. He says, "Koen, you really have to go out in Berlin, to nightlife in Berlin." And so what was so funny to me, kind of, I always dress like I want to, right? And so in most cities in the world, including in most German cities, I would typically be underdressed. So, right. So when the bouncer would look at me, they would be like, "Oh, you're not fancy enough to get in." But so this is the first time ever. It was in some kind of a bunker, right? Where everything was, strange lights and you felt like you were in a World War II or III kind of thing. It was a very special atmosphere, and it was the only place where I feared I was overdressed to get in. And so, indeed, some people in our company from other German cities were refused, but I was kind of Berlin dressed enough.
You were grungy enough. You were stylish enough. Yeah.
So I always kind of it indeed depends on where you are and what you're receptive to. Yeah.
Totally. So that leads me back. Do I really? Yeah. Okay. Let's finish the question because I want to know some of these. Okay. So now back to the quick fire round of questions, which we took 20 minutes already for. Yeah. Beatles or Bach?
Beatles.
Porsche or Tesla?
Wow. Neither.
Neither?
I am buying a fully electric vehicle, and I was interested in Tesla, but I'm one of these perky people that will not buy your car company if your CEO is doing stuff I completely disagree with. So
excellent.
Yes, probably
so much for your brothers that marketing has no ethics.
You see, and it does for me. I mean, I myself boycott lots of magazines and things for reasons that I think are pretty good. But yes, so I will buy a fully electric vehicle, but I'm looking at German, US, Japanese car companies that are now fully in the race. So I just love the competition right now in that market.
Oh, great. Yeah, and it's also a very interesting question from the branding perspective, because that's a new category. So which brand is it really going to be the combustion engine brands that dominated the market that are able to transfer the trust into the electric category, or should they create a new brand? What is your opinion there?
I personally think that they can add to their existing brand, and it is actually one of the things I talk about, right? So this is my book. It's not the size of the data; it's how you use it. So one of the things I talked about, one of my first consultancy was for the very first, ever in the 21st century, the first electrical vehicle on the American market. I don't think many people will remember what it is, so I won't even say the brand, right? But I was consulting that company for a while, and I was doing more tactical stuff, right? So I was, typical marketing allocation. The headquarters back in their home country said, "Hey, you have to hit more profits, but we are gonna kind of make the cars older. We're gonna not have a new generation in so many time." So the US branch came to me and said, "Hey, can you please model this, right? And say, hey," and I put this in a very little kind of spreadsheet, that if you make the cars older, kind of our profit will decrease unless you allow us more money for ads or something else. So it was that consultancy I was doing. And at that point, they said, "Oh, we are launching the very first electric vehicle on the market, and it's going to really have a halo effect on our parent brand." So they specifically, going to your question, they wanted to have kind of their brand and then the electrical vehicle. And just like Toyota Prius. And they said, "This is going to do wonders. We only think we're going to sell." This is, by the way, 2008, 2009. That's how long it is ago. We're going to launch it, and we're only going to sell a few hundred vehicles, right? Because, there was less people interested and the infrastructure wasn't there. But we're going to spend $250 million on advertising it. $250 million. Because some consultancy company had calculated what the halo effect will be. So they're like, "We're going to sell so much of our other vehicles," the brown vehicles, I call them. And so I was like, I don't trust this. So they were happy for me. And I'm like, well, I want just give me all the data on Toyota and Prius, which I then get and analyzed. Go ahead.
One question. It was a different brand, or it was a sub-brand of the car maker?
It was a sub-brand of a major Japanese manufacturer.
Okay.
They looked at Toyota and their price experience. And of course, what I saw there, that the first time price was launched, right? It was it didn't get this huge satisfaction rating on GD Powers and Associate. It didn't have an excellent brand opinion. That was the exact measurement there. And Toyota had a very high one. So it was only after price caught up, which is years later when the Price 2 was introduced, that it actually helped lift Toyota and helped Toyota sell more of its other products. And we actually interviewed people that came into the retailer for a Prius and then left with a Corolla because they're like, oh, I didn't know Prius was so expensive. So it also depends in the US on the gas prices, right? When gas prices are high for US standards, people like electrical vehicles because the acquisition extra cost can be thing. So I was like, no. So my halo effect was a lot smaller. And so I advised to only spend $100 million. So they could have saved $150 million right there. They decided not to go with me. They decided to spend $250 million. And so they had this big launch. They were the first electric vehicle on the market. And if you look at it right now, what is it now? I think 15 years later, it still didn't make a profit. And it's still overshadowed by other things, despite them spending so much money. So there is a lot of money at stake in these kind of in these calculations.
And to make good decisions can save you a lot of money and buy you a lot of goods. Then
I didn't see any percentage of, because I didn't do my decision. Otherwise, I would have liked to see a percentage of the $100 million they've saved.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So 3 more questions. Steve Jobs or Bill Gates?
Bill Gates.
Targeting or reach?
I would say reach. That may be something that I should kind of expand on, right?
Yeah,
so
please do.
I'm doing a lot of research, and I see this huge balance between what some people may call hyper-targeting and not targeting at all. And so here is what I mean. So a lot of kind of online ad providers sell what I would call hyper-targeting. And it has a whole bunch of ethical considerations, right? And now also with 3-party cookies going away. And I mind as a consumer myself being hyper-targeted. So I get upset, and people tell me it doesn't happen. It happens. I get upset when I put something into Gmail and an hour later I get ads for it on Facebook. I'm very upset about that kind of sharing. But there is kind of sharing based on what I do on, for instance, a platform that I trust and give the permission to, right? To have 1P sharing. And so I do like being targeted. I do like being shown, products and ads that are more relevant to me. So I do like some form of targeting. However, I think that specifically online, it's being oversold. One of the experiments we did very recently is to also kind of send the ad to people that are not supposed to be targeted, and we had very similar results. so I'm like, well, either our targeting algorithm is not that good, or there is.
But we're collecting massive amounts of data just to do this hyper targeting. But in the end, what you just said is that it doesn't really work.
So that is the thing. So because something is unethical or illegal, lots of companies think it must be effective, and that's
good.
not the
It must
case.
be good.
It isn't. It's like lots of things that is unethical or illegal and annoys your consumer, which isn't even effective. And so this goes back. This is a quick anecdote. So all the way to the 50s.
No, right? I love your anecdotes. Make it a long one. This is fantastic.
Yeah. So I bet you have somehow heard about subliminal advertising at some point in your career. And so the true story about it was that the guy who brought it out really wanted to sell his consultancy business. And he wanted to have more companies pay him lots of money. So he brought out this research which shows that if, in the movie theater, in the break, he showed for just like a millisecond, I think it was Coke and it was popcorn, if I remember correctly. And he says, look, during the break, more Coke and popcorn was sold in a comparison theater. So this was a big kind of hoopla. Of course, politicians jumped onto it. This is subliminal advertising because it's too short for any consumer to really consciously note it. And this should be forbidden. Now, the interesting part is that for 70 years since, this has never ever been replicated. So it is bogus. Subliminal advertising just doesn't work. But he got lots of money for companies, but just because it was unethical, they assumed it was very effective. And so I see that coming back in also online advertising. And so I'm like, yes, I'm all about effectiveness, as you know. Lots of my research in the last year is all about ethics, and it's all about, the privacy paradox. So why do people say they care a lot about privacy, but in their choices, for instance, it doesn't reflect? And so it's a 2x2. There's lots of things that are not ethical and also not effective, and kind of just bringing that out will help companies make poor choices and help consumers.
And I think, and then there's a better chance to change their behavior by pointing it out that it's not effective, that it's actually terribly dangerous. Like I had Bob Hoffman on the show, and he recently spoke in front of the European Parliament also about this. Like if the Gestapo or the Stasi or the KGB had this kind of data that the big digital companies have, I think many things wouldn't have happened. Like the reunification of Germany, I'm a little bit doubtful that I think they could have taken out networks much quicker and so on. And now it's like, I have nothing to hide, people say. Yeah, that's true. You have nothing to hide, but things can change. And I think the States are a good example where, like the laws about abortion and all that, suddenly the data of, like which websites you visit, location data becomes highly relevant if you actually commit a crime. Yeah, so I follow you completely on that path, but I think that it's the chance of changing something in the behavior is more that you as a scientist can prove that it doesn't work and that it wastes a lot of money. And I think then the chance of advertisers actually changing something is higher.
So to finish your question, so why I chose for Reach and why I had to doubt a second is the following. So there are colleagues of mine, which I highly admire and respect, that say Reach is everything. So for instance, there's now interpretations of that in business-to-business markets that said, hey, whatever business-to-business market you're in, the chances are that about 95% of your potential buyers are currently not in the market. I mean, I did a practice price paper on office furniture. So when are you interested in office furniture? When you're either kind of starting an office or you have to expand it. And so companies face this dilemma, right? And so this particular colleague says, oh, you should reach these 95% as much as the 5% which are currently in the market. I think that is complete BS. I mean, obviously, when I'm selling office furniture or whatever B2B product you have, or when I'm selling a consumer product, I want to sell nuts to squirrels, as I said, Guten talking, right? So I want to kind of reach and I want to make sure I have the people currently in the market for a car. I have the people currently in the market for office furniture. And then, yes, I should also build my brand and stimulate mental availability to the people not currently in the market, but I'm not going to spend as much kind of time and resources on them. And an assumption of this line of thinking is that, look, the people currently in the market are the heavy buyers. They will see your ads anyway because they pay more attention to ads for the product because they're in the market. And I'm like, well, this is an heroic assumption that has not been validated by research as far as I know. So I'm like, reach is very important. I'm a kind of a journey or funnel thinking guy. You need the awareness, the consideration, especially for high involvement product. But it's completely kind of weird. And I have not seen any company say, hey, I'm going to spend as much kind of money reaching each and every one of these potential buyers not in the market as the people currently kind of ready with the money in their hands to buy my product.
That's true. But the assumption that only reaching those will actually convert in the highest amount of sale is also depending on the category. I mean, this is a really complex topic that we can make. We can spend the rest of the podcast talking about this because sometimes it's also important for certain goods that people that will never buy your products still know the product. If nobody knows what Mercedes stands for, the Mercedes buyer doesn't get the full value of the Mercedes. So you need to advertise to many people that will never buy a Mercedes just to deliver the value that in that moment the prestige of the Mercedes delivers. And then there are many like very functional products where it's totally like what you just said. You just need to find the squirrels that need the nuts. It's like they want them. And I also think it's like to back to our stories, like reach would have been that I juggle all over town all day long. And that is also not possible because every company always have limited resources. So you target also just by focusing your resources because nobody has enough resources to target to everybody. But I think a good example where this reach has worked very well is like the expansion of Red Bull, for example. Mateschitz, like when he started out, he started to sponsor the Formula One immediately. And people said, excuse me, but 90%, 95% of the people watching Formula One, they live in countries where Red Bull is not even available. And this is a complete waste of money. And he said, no, it's not waste. It's investment in future markets. Yeah. So, and it worked great. It's like, hey, Red Bull was there, mentally available already, connected with the right mental concepts, the power, the Flügel, how do you call it? Gives wings. I don't know what is the English slogan? In German, it's verleiht Flügel. What is it in English?
Gives you wings. Yeah.
Gives you wings. Yeah, there you go. So it was connected with that kind of thing. So yeah, and so you always need like to look a little bit deeper. There's never the black and white answer for these kind of things.
I mean,
excellent.
One case I always used to teach is BMW films. So BMW in the US in about 2000, they didn't know what to do with their money, and then they didn't have the product to introduce that year. So they were pretty free to look at more like image advertising. And half of their employees wanted to do something on the internet. Half of them wanted to make movies. So they combined it. And so they had this BMW films made by up-and-coming directors. And so lots of them are very famous now. And the car was being shown complete freedom of the director. It was beaten up. It was shot through. There was blood on the thing and so forth. And then when we discussed the case, right, so the people who saw it, because this was 2000 and only on the internet, so with all the broadband connection issues and so forth, only very young people saw it in their 20s. Most of them were not able to afford the BMW. And then the question is, why do you do that? And you're like, well, you know, BMW was getting away from its edgy image. Because in the US, people typically say, I don't want to drive my father's car. And BMW was big in the up years of the 80s. So the new people were like, not very interested in the BMW, but they got that interest and they got that awareness. And even though they couldn't even afford the products, it was seen as a major revival of the brand. Oh.
Yeah, and then maybe they didn't buy it, but they often influenced also, like what the father, the kind of car the father buys often is influenced like by the younger people. Like my son influenced my car buying behavior quite a bit. If he thought the car was uncool, you thought twice about buying that car. So that's a very interesting point, and I think that this The idea also like connected with the mental availability is also the category entry points. Just to be known, just to reach everybody doesn't do the trick. It's about connecting yourself with a category entry point that is highly relevant. So when that category entry point mentally becomes available, you just pop up. You're in the relevant set. And so I think the mix between the two. And I don't think that the colleague that you mentioned, whose name we don't mention here, it's like in Harry Potter, when you listen to him carefully, he doesn't make the point as as blunt as we just presented.
It's definitely most his followers that I get into the clinch with. So to just kind of to give you category entry points are indeed very very important. I know them by a different name. So my first job, I did the PhD in UCLA, and my first job was in the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, which is a fantastic New England school. And so I co-taught branding there with Kevin Keller, which some people may know in your podcast and branding. And so he talked about point of difference, point of parity. And point of parity is that indeed you come to mind in the consideration set when people think about the category. And that was very much instigated by the first .com bubble, where there were all these Super Bowl ads that there was like a monkey playing on drums. And at the end, nobody knew that you were in finance or whatever you were selling. And we're like, well, this is a huge waste of money. And I applied this right away the next year. So they had Tuck School was very well known in the Americas, both North and South, but not in Europe. So a lot of European potential MBA students don't know it's a top 10 school. It's one of the oldest business schools. It's a fantastic place to go to. And so they had invited all these European business journal journalists to come over and be entertained. And I intercepted the brochure that we were going to give to them. The brochure was all about how we were different and better than Harvard. And I'm like, stop, we just cannot do that. When you start talking about your point of difference, if people don't know your point of parity, then they will make all these negative associations. So if you're going to say, for instance, hey, we have smaller class sizes than Harvard, then journalists will think, oh, probably because they're less popular, right? If you're going to say our faculty is more accessible than Harvard because each of them actually teaches in the MBA program, they're going to say, oh, they're probably less famous. Of course, they're, have lots of free time. So we changed the brochure and we first said, here is how we're similar to Harvard. Right. So we have all these reasons that we are as good as Harvard in these 3 or 4 key points. And then we said, so that's a category entry point, right? So if you want to learn a lot and you want to go to a great MBA school, this is what you do. And then, then people are open to say, how you're different. So I always find that, and this is the difference, I think Jenny Romaniuk, which I absolutely love. In the Ehrenberg Bas Institute, I think she posted something about being in the room and being out of the room. So once you're in the room, when people know a bit about you, then you can focus on your point of difference.
And you're relevant for the category. You've been accepted as and then they look at the difference. Exactly. Like they first buy the category and then they buy the difference within the category. And then that's where the brand comes in. Yeah. I love Jenny as well. She was also on the podcast, and I love also her new book. I don't know if you read it already. It's about measuring brand health. I think they're doing just great work, and I think they're along the line of the work that you're doing, and I think you're doing a lot of good in the world of marketing, like more evidence-based marketing. So that finally, with over half of the podcast gone, I finally come to my first real question, which is basically like the state of marketing science versus marketing practice. What is your perception there? Hopeful, devastated, in between?
I'm going to be very controversial, which is probably good for podcasts.
Go ahead. Excellent.
So I have been very concerned with the gap between marketing science and marketing practice for about 25 years. And so I in the beginning, I always thought it's us academics' fault, right? We publish in journals that no practitioners read. We write in a way that is way too complicated. The top journals that I publish in, right, 5% acceptance rate, and then you're in, if you're lucky, in 4 rounds, 4 years after producing the research. It's not timely, it's not relevant, and so forth and so forth. So I've done a lot to try to popularize, disseminate some of my research insights, right? So, I have the Harvard Business Review, I have the Sloan, there's a paper coming out about why brands grow with Oliver Cole in management and business, the new kind of...
Not how brands grow, but why brands grow.
Yeah, why brands grow, which I think is the more important question. You see my slight hint here. And so I've presented at conferences. I also now work in practice, and I've done consultancy. And so, yes, it is true that that a lot of kind of the research that, let's say, academics produce is just not at the level and at the timely level that practitioners can really use, which is one of the reasons that I have so much respect for Byron and for Jenny and for the Ehrenberg Bas Institute. They have obviously succeeded in making business listen to them. Same thing for instance, Les Binet in the UK, right? And I actually find that specifically kind of people in Germany and Austria specifically are very interested in what academics have to say. So my early consultancy was in Germany and Austria because I think it's unique in the world that when a practitioner in Germany kind of has a problem that they think is a bit too tough, they trust academics so much that they go to their alma mater and they ask their professor who taught marketing, hey, I have this marketing effectiveness problem. And so my first consultancy was with the professor saying, oh, but that's Koen Pauwels' kind of specialization. And I was referred to in that way. So kind of having a PhD, and I thought, so when I produced my first book, right, I'm out the back flap, and my short bio, I wanted to say I had a PhD. And my American publisher said, no, we cannot say that. We cannot not say on the back flap because no practitioner will ever buy the book.
They will not listen to you.
Have a PhD. Yes, they will say it's going to be too dry to read. And so, and I'm like, well, I also want to sell in Germany, and if you don't have a PhD, I won't sell there. So it talks to you about the different respects, right? So with all that I have done, I will say yes, academics can do a lot to disseminate, and we have some good role models. On the other hand, and this is my very quick anecdote, so I absolutely loved our dean in the business school, Paul Danis, and he had quarterly meetings with all of his faculty. And so, and he's an accounting professor, but he was on the board of lots of companies. I was only 2 years out. So this is like 2003. And I talked to him about, how I tried to get practitioners to listen to me. And I was doing so much kind of the bridging work. And he's like, Koen, it's not your fault. It's the marketing practitioner's fault. And I'm like, please explain. And he's like, look, right. So in my faculty, finance, let's say, right. So finance, my faculty are scientists, and the people on Wall Street who try to beat the stock market are also scientists. They have to be. They have very small errors to kind of improve. So faculty scientists, practitioner scientists, they get along very well. My strategy faculty are glorified consultants. They're not scientists whatsoever. And we had some of the very best strategy faculty on there, right? And they talk to kind of people in companies who are not scientists either. There's no gap between theory and practice in strategy whatsoever. It's only in marketing that you guys, the faculty, are scientists. And people that I talk to in marketing departments in these companies on the board, they are not scientists. They don't have the scientific mindset. They don't know what has come before. And so that always stuck with me. It's not just the academics' fault. And that just came back, for instance, I think 3 weeks ago on Twitter, where I still am, right? I kind of, it came up a marketing scientist, and I could only name one example, right? Our good friend in Australia. And I'm like, but lots have happened since the 50s and the 60s that Ehrenberg did his work. And so this person and I was referring to Kevin Keller. I was not referring to myself whatsoever, right? Or of all the other wonderful people in your podcast. And this guy says, I was in branding in the US for 30 years, and I have never heard about Kevin Keller. And now that's your fault. I mean, how on earth is this possible?
That is your problem.
I mean, it's like ignorance that is seen as a blessing, which is too American.
That's totally correct. And Jenny actually said, like, the way that they I also had Magda on from the Ehrenberg Bass on the show, and they do basically a test in the beginning. They basically test what is the mental model that this marketing department works after, and they just give them like statements: true or false, true or false, true or false. A little bit like Hans Rosling. I don't know if you know this book Factfulness, where he goes to Davos and asks these questions, and these world leaders don't even know basic facts about how many children are vaccinated against the 5 most important diseases in the world, and they make policies according to this worldview. And they basically do the same thing. They just go in with a bunch of questions, and then they have basically a bearing on where this department and then this marketing competence in the company is, and then they start debunking these faulty assumptions. For example, that growth comes from loyal customers. It's like even in cigarettes. I mean, like, cigarettes is the most addictive product in the world, and even in cigarettes, it's the long tail that makes the volume. It's the occasional user that buys 1 pack a year. And that's where the volume comes from. But if you think that your loyal customers will generate like your growth, then you basically your mental model leads you astray. And I think that's a very good way, like to go in like that. First, do like a mental assessment, basically. But it's also tough. It's tough. I mean, it's not tough conversations that you have afterwards, because people have to let go of things that they believed all their life, and then emotions come into play. So I want to see that.
I would say in marketing the problem is even worse. So yes, I completely agree. People who have been in marketing their whole life, they have some mental model that needs updating. But I think marketing is also one of the only places, we don't have any exam to be a marketer, right? It's not like you have, the financial kind of thing that you actually have to show that you know.
Bar exam for marketers.
And so the in-stream of the last 25 years of people who just jump on the new trend. Hey, we're a digital marketer. Or we're a generative AI marketer now, who don't even know anything about what happened before, who don't have any credential or any experience in marketing, and still are allowed to call themselves a marketer. I think that creates a unique opportunity and challenge for education in our side of the business.
And for this podcast. Because this is this was the original, like, Markenkraft is like find the sources and the reliable knowledge. So that's why you're here.
So I would say to close on that question, right? Academics, you don't have any excuse anymore. There's so many great ways to disseminate your knowledge, such as this podcast. And practitioners, you don't have any excuse anymore. You don't have to read the Journal of Marketing. You have podcasts, you have very short form blogs, newsletters that you can use to find the latest.
Excellent. So let's dive in to leave some knowledge behind in the podcast. You are the principal research scientist for Amazon. So one question I have for you, which actually came from one of my listeners, was like, what is the role of brands in the future in a platform economy? Do they become more important, less important? If they get in trouble, why they get in trouble?
So I'm an empiricist, right? So I go back to 20 years ago when people talked exactly the same question about the internet. So there's this, paper by, I think, Brilliofson of MIT talking about frictionless commerce. It's like, look, brand is not going to matter at all anymore online, because with one click you can go to the other brands, you can price compare, and brand is not going to matter whatsoever anymore. Now, this has not come to fruition. If anything, brand has been shown to be more important online. Now, why is this? Because online we're just bombarded with offers and information. And so the more we're bombarded and overwhelmed with information, the more we use shortcuts like brands, which is why it's so important to invest in your brand. So I just don't see that happening. So I see a huge importance of the brand. Maybe brief introduction about Amazon ads, right? So Amazon ads is mostly known by lots of people for the lower funnel things like sponsored products. So a consumer is already in your category and is comparing, and you put an ad there, right? But over the years, and this is why I came in, Amazon ads has been adding mid and upper funnel products. Right, so now like on Fire TV or on Thursday Night Football, or on DSP, which is all over the internet, you can basically kind of get awareness for your products. You can get consideration for your products. And so we've seen that investing in this one, specifically for brands that are, don't have that big of a brand image yet. This is what allows you to make this jump and to just see much more conversion. Right. Mm-hmm. So we know about branding and upper funnel advertising that it increases the conversion of your lower funnel ads. So if you kind of walk down the street, or virtual or not, and you see something pop up on BMW, right? Or you see something pop up, let's say about Coca-Cola versus a completely unknown cola brand. Whether it's a price promotion or a deal, which one are you going to click on or say yes to? It's the one, the brand you know. So I would say, in the platforms, I don't see anything. I mean, most of my research also, I have to split by brand familiarity, because you do see different effectiveness depending on whether your brand is already very familiar or not.
Right. Yeah. So that basically means that brands become more important even, and that you should be even more careful and make good choices for building your brands, because if you lose the brand, then you're up for grabs. Then somebody is always going to be more efficient, cheaper, and more frictionless than what you can offer. So and now, like that's one worry that many people have, like how do we deal with the platform economy? And the other one is like the recession, which is already there basically, or coming, and it's going to take a couple of years. And that was the GM Markendialog was about. So let's just recap a little bit in a nutshell. What is known, how to do good marketing in a recession? And I have one question afterwards, but let's start with that one question. So what is known to give a orientation, like reliable knowledge how to act in a recession? So,
sorry. So I would say this is the time to reconsider your marketing, just like you reconsider everything, right? So yes, I mean, it is an opportunity to see, how effective things are. Very often you're under pressure to cut budgets. So knowing what you can cut without, hurting your consumers or your sales too much, or your employees, is just very important. And so in all of my effectiveness research, in all of my consultancy, I always kind of clearly say, hey, these are the actions that are working very well for you, right? And these are the actions which are just not worth it. And then I try to convince companies to do a field experiment to execute so that they can see it in real data. So kind of being ready with it is very important. So I do a lot of work between marketing and finance departments. And so finance typically says to me that they don't trust the marketing department, because every year they ask for more money for a shiny new thing. And when finance says, then where can we cut down a bit? They say, no, everything is positive. So I think as a marketing department, you should be ready for such tough questions in any kind of economy, right? Go ahead.
And there's a good example, like Procter & Gamble, like Mark Pritchard a couple of years ago was the first one that called out the hyper-targeting and pulled 200 million from that, and like didn't have any effect at the cash register, like reinvested in others. And now they reinvested, they invested a lot in radio, because they basically said like the reach that we lost in linear TV, we can make up in radio. And they I think 43% more than they used to, like and it's massive what they're doing, and in a sense because the cost of reaching these people is so much lower, and at the same time you can reach young people that don't watch linear TV but have the radio running while they repair their car, while they're whatever, and radio usage among the 18 to 24-year-olds is the first time for years has been growing now. It's more than it used to be.
So the other thing I would say yes, and also kind of reconsider your creative message, right? Because some things may not be a good idea to tell during a recession where your customers are also hurting. But then kind of also don't be too negative, right? So, as I said in my Harvard Business Review article of, I think, 2 years ago, right? When we thought that the COVID was the recession, we didn't know that was going to be.
And then the Ukrainian war came.
So that talks about kind of your spending patterns. And so this actually happened to me. So I made the switch from the Tech School of Business to a startup university in Turkey, in Istanbul. This was 2008, and the founder of the university, which was running several businesses in several countries, said, "Hey, Koen, the recession is coming, also to my part of the world, in probably like 6 months," right? He's a very, very smart guy. And so every academic article I read tells me to increase my spending, and every manager I talk to tells me to decrease my spending on marketing. Which one should I believe? And so I had the formula. So I have this very nice formula about optimal marketing spending. And this is written by actually somebody in Ehrenberg Bauhaus Institute, by Malcolm Wright, 2009 Journal of Advertising Research. And he basically shows that, there's an optimal spending on marketing, which I won't have time to get into here, but you can.
Okay, we put that link in the show notes. Okay,
yes,
please remember. Yeah, please send me the link.
And so the interesting thing is, so your optimal spending on marketing depends on how many sales you expect, which typically goes down in a recession. It depends on your unit margin. So the more money you make per product you sell, the more you should advertise. I think that's very intuitive. And it also depends on your elasticity. So by which percentage do your sales go up if your advertising go up? For each medium, right? As you talked about radio and so forth. Now, the problem is, he says, well, I have no clue about elasticity and I have no data to give you to kind of estimate it, which is a very typical situation, right? So I'm like, no problem, let's just think through. And we thought through all of his business, and I'm like, are your sales going to increase or decrease? And it's like, decrease. I think only beer sales increase during a recession for...
Yeah, and sweets, gummy bears and chocolate.
So he was in finance, in fashion and apparel, so no way. Then unit margin, he's like, yeah, I can squeeze my suppliers, but my customers will squeeze me more. So I'm like, well, here you have the formula, right? So you should reduce your spending unless your effectiveness is increasing. And so we went through and we were like, where would effectiveness increase? And so, we had this business in Russia at the moment, which was an apparel business. And it was completely outspent by competitors kind of flooding the market with fashion. And there was more of a mass market one. So it was never, be able to afford to do TV advertising. And I'm like, look, the TV rates are way down in a recession because all of your competitors have stopped spending. Consumers are actually very open to the mass market message that because it was, a great value for money.
It was a cheap, it was
a relatively cheap brand, right? And so this is the time to go big on TV advertising in Russia at the time. And they did it to great success. And they could do it because they were pulling from other places even more than competitors, because they're like, he had a bank in Romania and we were like, well, the recession is going to last way longer than anybody else thinks. So we even closed branches there. So we really reallocated based on a formula that we used without any data, just thinking through what will probably happen and where money would be well spent in a recession.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay, that link goes in the show notes, guys. That's great, and obviously all the books that you've written in Chinese. No, but I was really impressed, like to find all those languages that your books were translated in. So kudos to that. And we had like maybe one thing like on the psychology, like what you just said, like some things change in a recession, and you've researched that and you spoke about at the GM Markendialog about that. Maybe like a small like small summary of what you would say, what is the biggest difference in a customer in a recession besides being price sensitive?
Oh wow! So I think number one, people have a different kind of view on gains and losses, and this goes back to I did research with somebody. We're still trying to publish. It's a fantastic paper, and this talks about gains and losses and price promotions. So price promotions are so fascinating because you temporarily reduce your price. It's a deal people buy, so that's a gain for the consumer. But then you have to go back to regular price, and that's a loss.
That's painful.
That's painful, right? And so we saw that managers actually in a recession, right, where people would think you would increase price promotions, they cut back a bit on price promotions. And we were like, why is this the case? And so we found our theory in the psychological theory of regulatory focus, which talks about being in a promotion focus or a prevention focus. So promotion focus is also known as a growth mindset, right? So people have an intrinsic kind of tendency to do that. So I'm extreme on promotion focus, for instance. So I see life as opportunities you either take or you don't take, like coming on this wonderful podcast. And so for me, I'm much more focused on potential gains. So I really like a deal, and I don't mind it that much when you put back to regular prices. My wonderful wife, who co-wrote this book with me, right, Break the Wall, Zeynep, she's much more prevention focused. So prevention focused folks see life as disasters that you either avoid or don't avoid. Now, there's also a temporal tendency to that, which is really more interesting, which talks about, depending on the situation and your mood, you're either more promotion or prevention focused, right? So going back to your wonderful juggling in Brussels thing, when you're on a Saturday, when you're trying to have a good time, you look for entertainment options. You don't mind if the juggling was a bit lame.
Completely promotion.
You only spent like 5 minutes, of your time, which, you had lots of time anyway, and it could be a really good experience to see your juggling.
You didn't say our juggling was lame there, no? Like but 5 balls, torches, knives, that was not lame.
Yeah. Whereas if you're speeding to your work in the Place de la Monnaie, you're really you're trying to get to work, you're trying not to be late and have your boss on you again.
That's right. You're prevention focused. I never thought of it like that. It's true. It's true. It's like you don't want to be late. You don't want to be late back to work also. And it's about efficiency. You're in an efficiency mindset, and that's always preventive. You don't want to waste. Oh, that's very good.
And so one of the things we did, right? And so in this research is we looked at the whole United States. That's where we had data, and all of the markets, and we had the recessions and the boom times, and we had also some markets who are just much more labor market resistant to a recession. Like for instance, in Boston, where I am, in a recession, not that many people get fired, even the people who do have lots of social welfare. So there is more prevention focus, but not as much as in another town in the US where you don't have that safety net. And so we actually show that if you give a temporary price promotion in a recession, yes, people take the deal, but they're way more upset than in boom times when you go back to regular prices. And so it's not a good idea to give temporary price reductions. I mean, if you can reduce your regular price in a recession, then good for you, right? Yeah. But you should be careful. So people are more in a prevention focus, and they look more at stuff to kind of save stuff. I mean, they don't know if their job is on the line and so forth. And so they think more about avoiding bad choices than about making optimal choices.
So that means basically you should add value instead of give no discount, add value. So that gives you a psychological security that it's a good deal, but you still don't learn a lower price. So then you don't see the difference later when you buy it again. It's still at the same price that you bought it. But that would be that. So that's a very good takeaway. So excellent. And I want to be respectful of your time because I know that you have to go. So I would like to wrap up our great conversation with something like, if you look back at your long career, what was something in your research or in your professional career that you would have wished that you realized earlier or learned earlier? What was the biggest surprise where you said
oh wow. I would say when I was very young, I wanted to be an explorer. I mean, when I was 7, I wanted to be a math teacher, but then when I was my teenage year, I wanted to be an explorer. So I was very excited to discover marketing when I was, I think, 19 years old, because I was like, well, most of the earth is explored, unfortunately, but there's so much in this kind of combination of psychology and economics that I want to see. I think, for me, I just
how did you just sorry to segue there. How did you discover marketing? Like, what was the moment that you discovered marketing?
So I was in an undergraduate in my native Belgium, but I went with the Erasmus exchange to Galway in Ireland. And I'm now, after 25 years, taking my family back this June. So I'm very excited about that. And so that was the time that I experienced marketing, and I was taught by a practitioner. It was taught by somebody with 25 years in the field, very exciting. And in Ireland, you have to kind of read for your degree. So in the exam, you have to specialize, and then you have to show the professor on the exam that you know more than she or he does. And that's the only way to get more than 70%, by the way. So I specialized in reference price, which is also key to the gains and losses I just taught. So as a 19-year-old, I was reading up about reference prices, and I was so excited that kind of psychology and economics, which I was studying at the time, met so beautifully in there. And so I was like exploring the human mind in the context of exchange, which is what marketing is. And there's so much new stuff to learn every year. My students, my colleagues, what I read in also academic journals, it just is always very kind of exciting to me. And so I think I would say kind of make sure that you continue to learn new stuff. As for something that I learned in companies is really take care of your internal stakeholders. This is anybody who works in a company probably already knew this, but I had to learn this the hard way. So
as a consultant, like don't think that the truth wins always in organizations.
Here we go. So I was in a Belgian company for about 2 years before I decided I hate office politics. I'm going to go into academia, and there is less office politics in academia. There is some, right? But then working again for companies, I realized kind of a complete focus on the external customer, right? Which is what, marketing myopia and everybody tries to convince you. You really, really have to make sure that people inside your own company know what you're doing, know the value of it. Because otherwise, they don't tell it to the external customers, right? Let's say, you're trying to influence the sales force. If the sales force is not convinced about the value of your insight, it's going to be tough. And also, if you don't take a lot of care of your internal stakeholders, if there's a recession or, they need to cut somebody, then it may be your head that's on the chopping block. So I mean,
and if it's not your head, then it's your budget,
yes,
for sure.
Exactly.
Then you can't do anything anymore. If you haven't done internal marketing before for your own marketing budget, exactly, then that's on the chopping block.
So that's something that I learned and that I wish I would have known earlier. That is
okay. Well, that makes two of us. I learned that also very late. I was always surprised when the truth didn't win. Well, it's not logical, it's psychological. Oh, that's great. So looking forward, like what do you hope for in marketing science and practice for the next years? What is I know that what we just talked about, also you have an idealistic view of what should happen, also in the way that we deal with data, hyper targeting and all that. What do you hope for?
Oh, let's see. So I hope for, first of all, a lot more cross-fertilization between, let's say, science and practice in marketing. All of my academic research the last year has all refocused on better marketing for a better society. And I think it's because I do so much consultancy and I do it for profit companies. I'm like, hey, in my free time, in my research time, let's investigate, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Let's investigate maybe racial bias in influencer pay. Let's do stuff about disinformation and elections. So I apply marketing tools to non-for-profit marketing settings. And so I really hope that comes true. I mean, for instance, in ethics, right? I'm now kind of, as I said, researching the privacy paradox. So kind of, how do you do good research to somehow quantify whether consumers are actually kind of harmed by companies, sharing data? And then what the solution should be, and how should we consult kind of government regulators, which have very different minds in the US versus the European Union, by the way. How do we do good research to kind of properly consult, both companies who do want to, most managers I know do want to do the right thing, but what is the right thing is a good question. And how do we give kind of consumers a lot more freedom of choice? So personally, and I think this is the reason I fit so well in the US, I want freedom of choice. I want the company to say, hey, we either won't share your data with third parties or we pay you $100 to do so. And so instead of the regulator just forbidden every kind of sharing, right? And I want to have a strong difference between 1P sharing, where for the trusted websites that I have, they use my past in the website itself to get me better ads and products. I think personally that's very different from 3-party sharing, which I don't mind is going away personally. And so I think we need some good research. We have great research to show that stopping 3P cookies is bad for publishers and advertisers. I mean, there's great quantifications about how much they lose. But then to recommend to a regulator, hey, we should allow 3-party cookies because there's no good research that quantifies how it hurts consumers. I'm like, we can't do that. We need better research to kind of, quantify the different perspectives and to then basically be able to influence and put them on the same scale.
I mean, they would lose probably in the short term, but another thing, like it would basically take away the logic of clickbait, which is influencing our society in a very strong way, like that the logic of just making somebody click on what you're giving them, like which is sensationalizing the news, sensationalizing the headlines, sensationalizing everything, even if it's not true. And now with artificial intelligence coming on and being able to, I just saw Trump being arrested yesterday from the FBI in Mar-a-Lago. A picture. It's true. No, it's not true. It was just AI generated.
There are some things that haven't happened yet, and things that will come to pass.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, that's great. So that's what you hope for. So more responsible, still remain like keep the freedom in the system because it's important, but at the same time find solution and find out what's good and what's bad. I think that's something good to hope for. And
you can think about, yes, clickbait is horrible, but at the same time, a lot of people, including me, want some degree of personalization. It has been 5 years that I've been solicited to get a high school diploma. So before personalization,